But I would love to know from you, what is something that you think job seekers should be doing but aren't?
Oh, maybe it's something they're doing, but they shouldn't. Uh,
That's
I
good too.
see, like, there's Canva and all the different AI things, and we are seeing more and more of these resumes that are very um, creative. They're very graphic. You've got all these different colored things going on and stuff like that. And I personally still love just a good, simple formatted resume that's easy for me to read.
Welcome to Control Your Career, a podcast to help you conquer uncertainty, shatter imposter syndrome, and rise above the expectations imposed by others. My name is Julia Toothacre, and I am the career coach and strategist at Ride the Tide Collective, my career development company, where I offer career coaching courses and I have a plethora of free content. I have been doing this work for well over a decade, and I want to help empower professionals like you find clarity, navigate your career with intention, and help you advance in your career in alignment with your unique personality, preferences, and values. This podcast is a great place to start your journey toward controlling your career. I'm bringing back the ever popular Recruiter's Perspective theme for season 11 with a new group of recruiters and talent acquisition professionals to help you understand the hiring process from their lens. We'll be digging into resume and interview tips, talking about how the ATS works, looking at the history of the job market, and we'll be tackling hot button topics in recruiting and hiring. This is going to be a season full of great advice, tips, and uncovering the truth about the hiring process from those who are on the front lines of hiring. Find this episode and more at ridethetidecollective.com and connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post career information and inspiration to help you control your career. Welcome, everyone. We are back with another episode. And I have to say, I feel like I've been hunting my guests down for a number of years to be on the podcast. My guest today is Jamie Dye, and she is the talent acquisition team lead at M3 USA, which is a biotech research company. And Jamie, I feel like we have been connected for a number of years, and finally the stars aligned. You were able to be a guest on the podcast. I'm so excited. Thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Yes, I would love for you to give kind of a rundown of your experience and your background in talent acquisition. I know it's pretty extensive, and so I want to make sure that our audience knows where you're coming from and then what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I've been in talent acquisition for about 4 years now. So not as long as quite a few people, but definitely had a good experience in it so far. I started after a kind of a extended career break, and I got a temp job doing talent acquisition, and I loved it, and I've been doing it since then. So I've worked with a larger company like Lowe's. I did that for about a year, and then I worked at Randstad on the Google account for a little while before I kind of found my home here at M3, and I've been here for the last almost 3 years now.
Nice. I love that. And can you give us a rundown of the types of positions that you recruit for at M3?
It varies a lot. So they have quite a few different business entities, and mostly on the healthcare technology side of things, market research, physician recruitment and placement services, recruitment marketing. They also do clinical research. So it could vary from clinical research coordinators, physician investigators, site managers, all
Mm,
the way to, technical positions for the M3 side of things, whether that's software engineers and things like that, marketing roles, or, higher level executive staff as well. We kind of do everything from the top to bottom.
Okay. I have a really nuanced question just because of the type of work that M3 does. Are people hired into like a full-time contract like a normal corporate job, or do they run more on, well, I didn't word that well, but do they run more on like a project basis or a contract, like beginning and end type basis? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. So we mostly hire full-time permanent positions. There's
Okay.
occasionally where we'll like on the clinical research side of things, we'll have a really fast, high enrolling trial, like a vaccine trial or something like that. And we'll hire short-term contract or temporary workers for roles like that. But for the most part, we are going to be full-time staffed. A lot of our principal investigators on the clinical research are contract and they work fewer hours just because they don't
Mm.
need to be on site for that full 40 hours a week.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. I just wanted to I wanted listeners to understand some of the context and nuance there, because I know a lot of times, like you said, different projects pop up and
Yeah, for sure.
is there enough staff? What do we do? So I love that. I love that. Okay. I want to just jump right into recruiting questions, because I know, I think what you recruit for, especially on kind of the biotech, more medical research side, is a little bit different than most of the guests that I have had through this season. So what does ATS look like for you guys? Like what are you using? Are you using ATS, and how does it function for you on the back end?
So we use SmartRecruiters for our ATS. It's not one that I had heard of before I started working here, but it works pretty well for us. Standard ATS functions. It's really kind of like the file cabinet of candidates. I know a lot of people are concerned that it's going to weed out their application and things like that. But really, we're just like everybody else. We're going in there, we're looking at applications, we're moving people forward and things like that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I feel like that aligns a lot with what people have said this season. It's a filing cabinet. Everybody, nothing special to see here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into some more specifics around resumes. I know, like, this is another hot topic. What are recruiters looking for on the resume?
I'm looking for, the key skills. Do you have the experience doing what this job needs you to do? If it's on the clinical research side, if it requires phlebotomy experience, have you done phlebotomy? Or if it requires, taking vitals or doing EKGs and things like that, is that on your resume? In the more technical positions or the leadership positions, are you showing where you've had successes? I don't need to have like a bullet for everything you do during your day, but I need to have something that showcases that you're good at what you do, that you bring something to the table. And, all the little fine details we're going to get to in our phone screen conversations. And I really think the resume should just put your best foot forward, give the high level details that you can bring to a position. And I've heard this for years, but, make sure your resume reflects the job you're applying for.
Mm,
You know, if you've done things in the past that are very irrelevant to what you're applying for, when we're reading that resume, if it doesn't translate to what we're hiring for, it's not going to look like a good fit to us.
right, right. Okay. I really love that you're talking about that. And I want to dig into a little bit more nuance specifically with research, because I saw this in higher ed. So in higher ed, if you're on the faculty side and sometimes on staff side, but mostly on the faculty side, the ones that do research, they write their resumes a little bit differently to reflect some of that research. Is that true in the types of positions that you're hiring for, or is it still more of a standard format for a resume?
It really depends on the position. So if you're a physician and you're coming in and you have, this great research background, you worked on a lot of trials, you worked with a lot of different sponsors and things like that, you're going to want to have a resume that's focused on that, that shows what type
Mhm.
of, you know, what you did in that research. Were you an investigator? Were you like a co-investigator? Were you just
Mm,
like on the medical board who kind of reviews the process as a whole? So, having those trials listed out, the companies you've worked for, the types of trials you've worked on, and what your role was in those trials is very helpful. If you come in as a coordinator, listing some of your research is definitely going to be helpful, but more of a broad level overview, like what types of trials have you done? What phases were they? What was your role in them? So it can kind
Okay.
of vary based on the position.
Okay, that's really helpful. I just want to give people again like a little bit of nuance there because I think sometimes if you're searching general resume advice but you're in a niche area, it can be hard to get some of the specifics there of what needs to be reflected. I would imagine too length is not as big of a deal if you're trying to kind of show the different things that you've done throughout your career.
Yeah, especially for physicians, advanced practice providers, and things like that. Their resumes may be quite a bit more lengthy to show
Mhm.
all of the different research and the different areas they've worked in. I think, for other positions, we're probably looking at 1 to 3 pages, not terribly long, but a lot of them are, I mean, for the most part, over a page.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Let's shift gears into the interview and especially, the screening interview that you do with candidates. What are some of the tips that you have there?
I think that people should just be themselves, be honest when you're asking these questions to candidates. You're just looking for their authentic responses. Obviously, you need to have done some research on the job and be aware of why you're applying to it. But sometimes we get candidates who will be very, you can tell they've done some ChatGPT or things like that, and they're reading you very rehearsed responses, and that's really not what we're looking for. We want to see your authentic self. We want to see, how you would handle this situation in real life and get a good idea of what kind of fit you are for the role so that we can move you to the next stage if you're a good candidate and it's going to be a good role for you.
I love that. I think everybody has brought up AI or Chat GPT this season, and it seems like such a blessing and a curse. But I think you're the first one that's brought it up in the interview side. I'm really surprised that people are reading verbatim answers, and you can tell, right? Like you can
Yeah.
kind of see it. Yeah, I
And
think that's where getting a little bit more nuanced, if you're going to use AI or use it as a guide and don't let it speak for you or give you,
I
the
think it's a
exact
great
language.
guide to pull up the kind of questions you might encounter in that interview and things like that
Mm,
so that you can be prepared to answer them. But when you're just reading, from a screen or paper that you printed out with those answers, and then they dig into the question and they ask follow-up questions, then you're not prepared and it kind of
right.
comes unglued.
Okay, everybody listening, like take heed, okay? This is the thing you need to be aware of when you're using ChatGPT or any other AI. Use it as a guide. I think that is the key thing here. It really should not speak for you, so to speak, but really just be there to help and enhance. So I really love that. I'm glad that we get to talk about that. Let's talk about cover letters. This is always so controversial with everyone. How do you feel about cover letters? Does your company care about them? What's the gist there?
I don't think that we have a preference one way or another. If you send in a cover letter and we're looking at your resume, we're probably going to glance over your cover letter as well. And I
Mm,
think that it depends on what you're applying for. There may be roles that it's very relevant for. If you're applying to be, an investigator and you want to tell me about how you've gotten into clinical research in the last few years and here are some of the things you've done, or if you're wanting to share references that are very relevant to what you're applying for, I think those are great places to do that.
mhm.
But then I think, especially in high volume roles or more entry level roles, there's so many applicants. We're not looking at all those cover letters because we just don't have time.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I think that's what people have to remember too, like where you are in your career kind of matters when it comes to the cover letter. And sometimes that cover letter, especially right now, when I think things are a little bit more competitive, although I don't know if you see that in your industry right now, but sometimes that cover letter can help set you apart for a hiring manager.
And I specifically think like when people are looking to relocate, and
Mhm.
things like that, just it doesn't even have to be a full formal cover letter, but just a quick message that says, hey, I realize that my application says I'm here, but I'm moving to this area within whatever time frame, and I'd be very interested in this position. So I think there's just you really have to, is it an appropriate time for a cover letter or a message to go with your application, or is it not necessary in this circumstance?
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you gotta listen to that because I think there's been a lot of no, we don't read cover letters, don't submit them. But this is another instance where sometimes it's appropriate and it makes sense and it will help and it will enhance. So it's always this, it depends on the situation and the scenario. Love that. Okay. One of the topics that we wanted to cover today is this idea of taking a career break. And this is something that you did. You took a break to become a mom and took some time away with your kids. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the choice to make that decision and kind of the process you went through there?
Yeah. So in 2015, I got married and we moved across the country. So, and initially, my career break wasn't intended. I worked for a state agency and they just weren't equipped to set up for remote work at the time for the position that I had. And so we moved to a new state and into a very small area, and finding employment was difficult. So I decided, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of time and I'll find a job. It'll come. But then we decided, hey, it's a good time to have kids,
Yeah.
and ran into some fertility issues. And it took longer than I expected. And it was a more emotional, like trying time in my life. And I'm very grateful that I was able to do that without having to work a full time job on top of it, because it is definitely, a juggling act when you've got so many things going on like that. So took that time off. I went back to work in 2021 when my daughter was about 4 and,
Mhm.
ready to go to preschool and things like that. So I'm very grateful for the time off. But during that time, I did things that I felt like helps me stay relevant. I
Mhm.
went and got my MBA, and I went to as many in-person classes as I felt like going to, but it was a great way to network, to meet people, to keep conversations going. You know, Soft skills are kind of use it or lose it sometimes. When you're not practicing talking to people every day, it's harder.
Yeah.
Um, so, I did a lot of networking as a military spouse that was readily available. They had all kinds of, interview preparation, resume preps,
Mhm.
networking events, and things like that. And so that made it a little bit easier for me to get out and, stay connected. But I do want to stress you, those types of events are available to everybody. If you look, libraries, community colleges, um, people on LinkedIn, people on Facebook, there's a lot of ways to connect and find those opportunities. And I think staying connected in that network and keeping those conversations going help you stay in that practice and confident when you're talking to people, and also relevant in whatever industry you work in. Webinars are everywhere. There's certifications everywhere. So there's
Right.
so many things you can do on a part-time basis, as little as much as you want during that time away, to stay up to date and stay relevant in the industry and how things are changing and what that looks like when you do jump back into the career search.
Yeah, yeah. And so to clarify, you knew you were going to go back, right? Like after you had kids?
Yeah, I thought I was going to go back very quickly afterwards. And then I was like,
Mm.
oh no, I love this stage. I'm not giving her to anyone else right now.
Yeah.
So I did stay until she started preschool, but it took me a little longer to be ready to go back. But yeah, I always knew I was going to go back.
Okay. I feel like this is a really important distinction because I think there are some moms who don't know that they want to go back. Like they are like, I am living this stay-at-home mom life and this is what we're going to do. And sometimes life has a different plan or something comes across or, whatever it may be, and you end up needing to go back. Other people, I think, do plan it. I feel like what I'm hearing too is, and regardless of your situation, it's really good to stay connected in some way when it comes to skills, relationships, whatever that looks like. And I know so many moms that feel so lonely and just
Yeah.
alone during that, those early years. And so making sure that you're getting connected somewhere to keep up those skills as you were talking about.
And it doesn't have to be a professional network, play
Right.
groups or, some type of hobby that you're in, anything like that that gets you out and connected with people. You're going to meet people that come from all different places in their life. And,
Mhm.
maybe they're stay at home moms, maybe they're working moms and things like that. So you're still building these connections in this network, whether it's professional or personal. And then if you do end up going back to work and you weren't planning on it, you've got this network of people that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm going back to work. Do you have any ideas or leads for me or anywhere resources for me to get started? Because I personally have been amazed by the people in my network and what they were able to help me do. And I want to clarify that it's not what they can do for you because,
Mhm.
we all get a lot of messages saying, hey, can you find me a job? And that's just not how it works.
Right.
But they can help you find the resources or get to the right place so that you can get there.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh. Julia here. Are you feeling stuck in your career, unsure of how to break through to the next level? I'm excited to share a transformative opportunity. The Career Advancement Intensive. It's a focused 1-day experience designed specifically for ambitious professionals ready to define their career path. In this immersive session, you'll work one-on-one with me to help you gain fresh insights into your professional strengths and uncover opportunities for growth. Together, you'll clarify your goals, refine your personal brand, and develop a strategic roadmap tailored to your unique aspirations. Imagine leaving the day with renewed confidence, a clear vision of your next steps, and practical actions you can implement immediately. As a bonus, you'll receive additional resources, tools to enhance your resume, optimize your online presence, and deepen your understanding of what drives you professionally. Not all coaching requires a 6-month commitment. The Career Advancement Intensive is perfect for ambitious professionals who want answers and strategies quickly. Before committing, let's make sure that this program is the best option for you in my complimentary career coaching clarity call. The link will be in the show notes and description for this episode. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, I want to talk about the return to work for you. So you did, you talked about staying connected and having different opportunities. Did you feel like that time away was a barrier for you at all? Like, did you face any adversity there or were people pretty understanding? Like, how much did you explain that gap of time, or did you?
So when I came back, it was, 2021. COVID was still kind of, a hot topic for sure at that point. And the first job that I took was more kind of like an entry level customer service job that I could do from home. And it wasn't really a good fit for me in that moment, but it got me back into that work environment. It got me
Mhm.
back talking to people. It got me back, having conversations, being on the computer, doing different things. And that helped me get into the next role. So I wouldn't say it was easy. Um,
Right.
and, you know, I don't think that after, like, I had a 6-year break. So I don't think after so long, you're going to jump right back into exactly what you want to do. So I think you need to be flexible too and, have realistic expectations of what that first year or two back are going to look like because maybe you do land that unicorn job that's perfect for you and you just jump right back in. But maybe, you need to get your feet back in there and get going first before you find exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's such good advice. And I think that's good for people to hear who are going through this because I know for me, I had like a pretty extensive professional career and I decided to start a business But just that transition out of work into becoming a mom, and then even trying to transition into focusing on my business full time. It took me a couple of years, where I was kind of more dabbling in the business
Yeah,
versus giving it 100%. And some of that was because it was a new thing, and I needed time to kind of ramp up. I wanted to spend time with my kid. And so I was trying to balance the two and temper that, high achieverness inside of me that's like, no, you got to do the business. I was like, no, we're going to balance and it's going to be okay.
exactly. Because
Yeah, I,
being a mom, you're not transitioning completely out of one stage. You're just adding something back
right.
into it. And I think for a lot of people, like, if they take a break as a caregiver or whatever the case may be, they don't oftentimes aren't completely stepping away from that role. It's just
Yeah.
manageable so that they're able to step back into the workforce. So it really is a balance.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I want to share too some of the things that I think are helpful for moms who maybe never had as clear of a career path, right? So maybe you only worked a few years in a job you were kind of iffy about before you became a mom and stayed home or something like that. Volunteer. I
Yeah.
think that's such a great way to kind of fill some of the gaps in your resume if that's something that you are concerned about. Do different volunteer positions in your community. It's great for your kids whether they're with you or not. It's still just a good opportunity for you to get out and, to your point, have those interactions and that social time and all of that. I think is really helpful, and people look at volunteer positions, especially if you end up doing more than a general volunteer. Those things count. Even the stay at home moms that have done it for, the full 18 years, like, get on the PTA,
Yes.
be the team mom, do those
Yeah,
types
I
of
was gonna
things.
say these little league sports have, like, team managers or things like that.
Yeah.
And they do a lot. Like, some of them are
Right.
booking travel and arranging different tournaments to be in and things like that. So it is really an unpaid job. I mean, you are doing a lot of work. You're juggling a lot of things. You're managing schedules and, getting everybody in the same
Mhm.
place at the same time. It's not nothing.
Yeah,
And I think that's
absolutely.
important to remember.
Yeah. And I want to go back to what you were saying about kind of easing back in and setting expectations, because I feel like I want to emphasize that more because I want people to really hear that, especially if you had a more extensive professional career before you became a mom and decided to stay home. Like, it is okay to take a step back. It is okay to do something just to fill the time or to help you transition. And I think, especially if you are a high achiever, sometimes that feels like a slight to your career. But honestly, to your point, you have such a different energy as a mom. Like, I know I function way different now than I did before I had my kid. And I don't know that if I went back into a full-time position now that I would function the same way that I did 7 years ago before I
Yeah.
had him. So I really want to emphasize that for people, because I know somebody's going to listen to this and be like, no, I have to go back in at the director level that I had. And I'm like, that's one, not realistic, especially in this market right now. But two, do you want to go back into
Yeah.
that?
Do you? And I mean, I feel like in the last, maybe 10 years or so, like, industries change so much more quickly than they used to.
Mhm.
If you were in marketing 10 years ago and then you tried to jump back in today, you're going to be way behind the curve for what people are doing, what works, what
Mhm.
doesn't work, different platforms that weren't even available then. And
Right.
so I think you really have to know that you're probably not going to jump back in exactly where you left off. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's a good way to kind of, ramp yourself back up. if you haven't stayed, super relevant on things, and kind of get your feet under you before you take that next step and make sure the next step is right for you. You know, maybe that's not for you anymore, and maybe it is. Either way is okay, but I think that gives you a good kind of buffer to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I will tell you, I have a friend, I'm not going to share her name because she'll get mad at me. But a good friend of mine who had an amazing professional career, had her kid, and now is like, okay, I want to go back. I want to do something, and is completely changing her career path because her values shifted and what she wants out of time. And, being able to, what was it? She said she wanted to be able to pick her kid up from school and drop them off at school. And so she wanted something really flexible. And so she's doing this complete switch. She's going back to school and, doing all these things. And I think people need to hear that's okay too. You don't have to go back. You can do something new if you have the means to be able to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people too, they want something, remote is everybody's kind of goal these days. But
Mhm.
again, as you're going back to the workforce, you're going to have to be more flexible. You may not be able to get into a remote role right away. A lot of companies are going back to the office, and there's less opportunities for remote work than there was a few years ago. And I think that having that understanding of you kind of the market as it is a
Mhm.
good thing too.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I want to go back to something that you mentioned, and you don't need to share any more than you have because I know not everybody likes to talk about this. But you talked about having infertility issues. What I want to talk about with that is whether you stay home and you're managing that or you're working, which a lot of people are working to get like the medical benefits and all of that. The emotional toll that that takes on you while you are working. And I'll be very transparent. I have not gone through that myself, but I have many close friends who have gone through this. And what I want people to hear from this is it's okay to take a step back in the work. And this is really, I feel like this is for more of my like high achievers who give 100 and bajillion% in every position that they do. It's okay to show up, do the job, and leave in that season because there is so much going on. There's so many hormones, emotions, highs, lows, all these different things, and a lot of stuff to manage outside of your workday. Like it's okay to just show up, do the job, and leave. It's a season. So I just
Absolutely. And
want to
I
share
think a
that.
season is such a good way to put it. It doesn't define who you are, but it does define that little time in your life. And it's
Mhm.
okay for your focus to shift a little bit and take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't even just show up and get it done.
Right.
You really got to put yourself first in those situations.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Okay, one of the other things I want to mention with I call them career breaks. I think that's what LinkedIn calls them as well. Specifically on how you address it on the resume if you choose to address it. So you don't have to. I think it depends on the length of time and what you've done during that time, whether or not you even need to address it as being a thing. But it can create a lot of discrimination issues because I know being a parent and all of that, people will discriminate against that, even though they're not supposed to. So you as a candidate don't have to share any of that information. And I want to make sure that people understand that. If somebody says, hey, it looks like you had a break or you were only doing volunteer work during this time, what was going on there, you can just say, I had some personal things that I was dealing with during that time that I'd rather not talk about. Like you don't that's not the best wording, but
You
something to that
Yeah,
effect.
you don't have to share anything you're not comfortable sharing. When I talk to candidates, we're talking about their different experiences and when they worked at different places. And I'll be like, oh, it looks like you took a break from this time to this time. That was a fairly lengthy time. Did you do anything to stay relevant in the industry, and things like that? So I really avoid asking them why they took the break because it doesn't make a big difference to me in the end of the day. Like, You took a break. That's what it is. Did you stay relevant if the industry has changed a lot and it was a long time? Was it 3 or 4 months and it's really not going to affect the outcome of anything? So I think that, most recruiters and hiring managers understand that life happens.
Right.
Um, and so don't feel like you have to tell them every thing about what you did during that time. But if
Yeah.
you did do something to stay, like you said, volunteer, or you maybe did some part-time or freelance or contract work during that time,
Right.
those are okay things to put on your resume. If it's a short term, I always suggest, if it's contract or a temporary role, to put that, just so that it explains the short term. But, you know, anything you did to stay relevant is, important to the decision to move forward.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say we didn't mention this before, but contract work is also another great way to ease back in, contract work, temp positions. There's so many temp agencies
Yeah.
out there for all different levels and different types of roles. So it's not just entry level temp work, but people go out on maternity leave and
Yes.
they need somebody at a certain level to be able to fill in or with a certain skill set. So those opportunities exist as well. So don't feel like you have to take a huge step back if you don't want to. You can do some of those different options there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's temp agencies, directly on employer websites. A lot of times they'll host their own temporary positions. And then a
Mhm.
lot of the freelance sites like Fiverr and things like that, where you can find, short term roles that help you stay up to date and or get your feet wet and get back into things if you want to. And also kind of test out, like you said, your capacity. Do you want to do full time? Do you want to do part time? And things like that before you take that permanent job.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, I can't remember if I've shared this on another episode, but I'm gonna share it again. I had an opportunity come up a couple months ago to take probably more than a full-time job, honestly, the way that it was worded. And I really had to think about it because I was like, oh, it was remote, which was good, but it was like a 40 to 50 hour a week job. And I was like, oh no, I don't know if I want to do that. Like I work like 20 to 25 hours right now in my business. Am I ready to give that much of myself and not be around for my kid? And ultimately I decided not to pursue it, but it was easier for me to make that choice because I was so clear in my values that I was able to go, yeah, this is too much. I'm not ready for that. Whereas for my business, if I'm doing something for my business, like if I need to travel or something like that, my family can come with me for we
Yeah.
homeschool. So we don't have to deal with like him going to school and stuff. But that's what you have to think about is what's going on in your life. What are the opportunities and things that you have that might shift or change the types of opportunities that you're going to want in the time away.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, Jamie, this has been so, so good and so helpful. I know there are going to be so many women specifically, although just to clarify, men can also stay home and take career breaks, especially as caregivers and different things like that. So even though I feel like we leaned a little heavy on the moms, but it's really parents as a whole, and career breaks can look different for everybody with like different medical things and caregiving and all of that. But I would love to know from you, what is something that you think job seekers should be doing but aren't?
Oh, maybe it's something they're doing, but they shouldn't. Um,
That's
I
good too.
see, like, there's Canva and all the different AI things, and we are seeing more and more of these resumes that are very um, creative. They're very graphic. You've got all these different colored things going on and stuff like that. And I personally still love just a good, simple formatted resume that's easy for me to read. If you're
Right.
using a fancy font and things like that, and I'm opening it in my ATS, maybe that font doesn't transfer over well and it looks crazy on my end.
Yeah.
So that is one thing. And really making sure that you update your resume constantly and you have somebody else look at it.
Mm.
Every time you make a change or every couple months, just have someone else look at it for you really quick and make sure it's relevant to what you're applying for. And make sure that you're honest when you're going through that application process. You're going to get rejections. It's part of the game. But if you're telling, you're clicking all the questions and the buttons and you're saying, yes, I can do all these things and you can't, then maybe you get to an interview and then you get a rejection after the interview and you're like, why? But you have to be honest.
Right.
And you have
Right.
to be realistic. I know in another podcast that you did, somebody was saying, like if you hit 50, 60 something percent of the stuff, there's a good chance that you might be a fit for it. But if you're really reaching for the stars and you've never done this before, you're not, apply for things you can do.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. Okay, I have to touch on the Canva thing because this comes up a lot. And whenever I get clients that come to me with a Canva resume, I'm like, no. Nope, not doing it for a lot of reasons. One, just the creativeness of it, while it seems like a good idea, really isn't, and it detracts from your experience. The bigger issue for me is that the creative elements in Canva resumes take up so much space. And so then you are just relegated to a very small amount of space for your experience because of what it tells you to do. If you just use a Word doc or a Google doc, so much more space, much easier, much cleaner. I know that that sounds antiquated. It's not.
It's
This is the
not.
standard.
And save it as a PDF so that what you see is what they see. When you submit it as a Word doc or a Google doc, and like I said, if the formatting and the systems doesn't match, sometimes it just is like jumbled symbols, or you've got white type on a light gray background, and I'm like, I can't even read this. I don't know what
Right.
it said. So
Right. And I will say I'm a Mac user, I'm an Apple user, and the Apple to PC transition, even between Word, not good.
yeah.
It's not good. So PDF for sure, for sure. Okay. Jamie, so good. I love that we wrapped it up with some really practical tips there. Where can people connect with you?
LinkedIn. I'm on there, Jamie Dye, and happy to connect with people.
Awesome. Awesome. I will make sure that the link to your profile is in the blog post for this episode. And don't forget, if you do connect with Jamie, to let her know that you heard about her from me, from my podcast, so that we know all those connections. That's really fun. And honestly, probably a higher likelihood that she will connect with you as well. So thank you so much, Jamie. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you.